Hello, welcome, or perhaps welcome back. If you are here, it is likely for one of two reasons. Either you have found yourself, once again, staring at a ceiling in the small, slow hours, thoughts circling with a quiet, persistent energy, or you are searching for a place where the world is finally allowed to be dull, where nothing is demanded, where no story asks you to follow its plot, where no character needs your empathy, where the only expectation is that there will be no expectation. You have come to the right place. This channel is a refuge for the overstimulated mind, a digital annex of quiet. We deal not in narratives, but in nuances, not in events, but in atmospheres. Our stories have no conflict, only existence. They have no climax, only a gradual, gentle dissipation, like breath on a cold window. I am not here to entertain you. I am here to accompany you, to provide a voice that does not startle, a script that does not surprise, a rhythm so steady that your own hectic thoughts begin to sync with its cadence, and finally, slow. Before we begin, if this specific quality of stillness is what you have been seeking, I would suggest you consider subscribing, not because I ask for your support, though that is always appreciated, but because it is a simple way to bookmark this door, to know that on any night when the noise of the world or the noise in your mind becomes a wall between you and rest, you have a key, a place to return to, a voice that will always speak in the same unhurried tone about the most unimportant things in the universe. Think of it not as following a channel, but as claiming a space, your space. You may wish to turn the volume down to a level just below your breathing. You may wish to turn your screen's brightness to its lowest setting, or away entirely. This is not a performance to be watched. It is sound to be absorbed. Tonight, we will not be going on a journey. We will not be exploring a forgotten city or a magical forest. We will be profoundly and purposefully still. We are going to do something that every human has tried at least once, an activity that is, by its very nature, an exercise in gentle futility, a task with no hope of completion, and thus no pressure to succeed. Tonight, we are going to count the stars. Not all of them, of course. That would be ambitious, and ambition is the enemy of sleep. No, we will choose a patch of sky, a manageable, familiar patch. Perhaps between the roof of your neighbor's house and the branch of that old tree, perhaps in the rectangle of your window frame. We will begin. 1, 2, 3, and we will inevitably lose count. A cloud will pass. A moment of doubt will cross your mind. Was that star 4 or 5? Your eyes will blur. You will begin again. This is not a failure. This is the entire point. The goal is not to reach a number. The goal is the counting itself, the gentle, rhythmic focus, and the soft, forgiving release when that focus scatters. It is a meditation for weary minds. Well, a repetitive celestial liturgy. So, find your position, settle into your pillows. Let the weight of your body be held completely by whatever is beneath you, and allow your gaze to soften, to become unfocused, to open rather than to look. Let the darkness behind your eyelids, or the gentle darkness of the room, become our canvas. We begin not with a once upon a time, but with a right here and a right now. There is no story. There is only the sky. Long is a clear night. Not perfectly clear. No night ever is, but clear enough. The kind of clear that comes after a day of rain, when the air has been washed and the dust settled. The darkness is not a flat black. It is a deep, velvety indigo, fading to a haze of amber near the horizon, from the distant, sleeping city. But here, in our patch, the darkness is pure, and into this pure darkness are pinned the stars. They are not all the same. Some are bold, confident pinpricks of pure white. Others are shy, barely there, only visible if you look just beside them, letting your peripheral vision catch their faint glimmer. Some have a hint of blue, a suggestion of cold, ancient fire. Others, a faint, warm gold. Do not search for constellations. Do not try to remember their names. That is work. That is astronomy. We are not astronomers tonight. Well, we are simply counters. Let us choose our patch. A simple square, line, bounded, perhaps, by those 4 brighter stars that make a lopsided rectangle, a celestial window. Within it, a scattering, a peaceful chaos. So, we begin with one bit, a steady, solitary point. The first, it holds its place, unwavering. 2, a little to the left, a pair, not a true pair, but a pair in our sequence, one slightly brighter than the other. The 3, pair, there, below them, but a tiny humble spark. It seems to flicker, not with fire, but with the simple movement of the air. High above us. 4, and so the story continues, descending into a meticulous, repetitive, and soothingly futile counting of stars, with frequent, gentle resets, descriptions of the subtle differences between stars, the slow rotation of the earth. The night is a vast and silent cathedral, and we have taken our seat in its deepest, quietest pew. The air is cool, not with the bite of winter, but with the soft, damp coolness of a settled autumn evening, a temperature that exists only to remind you of the warmth you have left behind in your bed, a warmth you will return to, but not yet. For now, the slight chill is a focusing thing, a gentle anchor to the moment. You have wrapped yourself in a blanket, or perhaps the weight of your own weariness is shroud enough. The world beyond this space, the world of ticking clocks and unresolved conversations, of lists awaiting tomorrow's dawn, has receded. Its sounds are muffled, its demands softened into mere whispers that cannot quite cross the threshold of this stillness. Here, there is only the waiting dark, and the slow, patient unveiling of light that is not light, but memory. The stars do not shine for us. They simply are, and in their remote, constant being, they offer up a profound indifference that is the ultimate balm. They do not care if you watch them. They will not judge your restlessness. They have existed in their silent nuclear furnaces for millennia, and they will exist for millennia more. And in the face of such scale, the frantic pace of a single human mind becomes what it always was, a local phenomenon. It is this perspective we seek, not through grand understanding, but through the simplest, most repetitive of actions, the counting. We will not conquer the sky. We will not map it. We will simply acknowledge it, one point of light at a time, until the act of acknowledgement becomes a rhythm, and the rhythm becomes a lullaby, and the lullaby becomes the bridge from thought to dream. Our patch of sky is arbitrary, and that is its virtue. Let it be the rectangle framed by your window, or the trapezoid formed between the eaves of the roof and the top of the distant oak. Its boundaries are imaginary, drawn in the faint graphite of attention. Within it, the stars are not a uniform scatter. They cluster in loose families, with wide deserts of deeper black between them. We begin not with the brightest, for that is too obvious, too demanding. We begin with the one that seems to emerge as your eyes adjust, a star that wasn't there a moment ago, and now, having settled into its perception, seems to have always been there. One is a pale silver, a speck of frost on the infinite black pane. It holds perfectly still, or does it? If you stare at it directly, fiercely, it seems to tremble, to dance a microscopic jig. This is not the star moving, but the atmosphere of our own world, the miles of turbulent air between us and the vacuum. A reminder that even this direct connection is mediated, filtered. We accept the tremor. It is part of its character. But we move our gaze just a fraction to the left. There is another, fainter. It does not announce itself. It merely persists at the very edge of visibility. You see it best by looking slightly away. A lesson in peripheral grace. Below this pair, a little to the right, a third light glows with a steadier, more confident presence. 3. It has a faint, almost imperceptible hue, not silver, but the barest hint of blue, like the coldest part of a flame. This is not imagination. Some stars truly do burn with a different color, a signature of their age and temperature written in light we can barely discern. We have a triangle, a weak, lopsided constellation of our own making. Our eyes trace its edges, connecting the dots with lines of thought that vanish as soon as they are formed. The space inside this triangle is not empty. It is a pool of deeper darkness. And within that pool, as we continue to relax our focus, more stars reveal themselves. They are not new. They have been there all along, waiting for the retina's rods to fully commit to the dark. 1, 2, 3, 4. A tiny, faint quartet nestled in the velvet. 4 becomes 7. The counting is not linear, it is spatial. We go from the apex of our triangle down its left side, a star, then a gap, then another, fainter still. 8 to 12, 9 to 12. The process is slow, methodical. The mind, so used to leaping, to associating, tries to hurry. It wants to name them, to group them, to see the plow, the warrior, the queen. We gently refuse. We are not here to see pictures. We are here to see points. Each star is an island universe, forever separate. Its light a lonely traveler. We acknowledge each island in turn. A shy one, directly between two brighter points often overlooked. 11, 12. A close pair. Not a true binary, but a happy coincidence from our vantage point. They are a diadem of two jewels. The act of counting is a form of breathing. Each number is an exhalation. The search for the next star is a slow, calm inhalation. The rhythm begins to establish itself, a metronome of attention. 13, 14. A cloud, a thin, high veil of cirrus, too fine to see directly, begins to subtly dim the stars. It does not blot them out, but smears their light, softening their edges. The brightest ones now have tiny, ethereal halos. The fainter ones disappear entirely, not with a snap, but by fading below the threshold of perception, as if they have taken a step back into the shadows of space. We do not fret. We do not start over. The cloud is part of the night's texture. We wait, our gaze resting on the now smudged patch of sky. The cloud is moving, an unhurried drift from west to east, a river of ice crystals miles above. As it passes, the stars re-emerge, not all at once, but one by one, as if being relit by an invisible caretaker. There is a steady blue one. There is the faint pair. They return, and with their return, a gentle lesson in impermanence and constancy. The stars were always there. The obscuration was temporary. Our count resumes, not from one, but from where we left it. 14. Yes, it is still there. 15. That one is new to our count, or perhaps it was always there, and we missed it before the cloud's cleansing passage. It winks. Just once, a sharp, greenish flash. A meteor, a tiny grain of cosmic dust, incinerating itself in a final, brief salute. We do not make a wish. We simply note it. An event in our eventless night. Then it is gone, and the steady, unchanging points reclaim their dominion. The rectangle of our attention feels scanned, but repetition is the soul of this endeavor. We start again from the top right corner, this time moving in a slow, sweeping raster, like the eye of a scanner. 1, 2. The numbers are different now, because our path is different. We are not recounting the same stars in the same order. We are discovering new sequences, new relationship. A star we called 9 in our first count might now be 14. It does not matter. The number is not a name. It is a momentary placeholder, a bead on a string that we are not keeping. We drop the beads as we string them. Purpose is the motion of the hand, not the necklace. The night deepens. The Earth's rotation, imperceptible to our senses, but undeniable in its effect, carries our window of sky slowly westward. New stars creep into the frame from the right edge, fresh and untouched by our count. They are slightly brighter, a different population from this arm of the galaxy. We welcome them with the same monotonous reverence. 23. A bold, yellow-white star. 24. With a faint smudge beside it. Perhaps a distant nebula, perhaps just a trick of the eye. We accept the smudge as a countable entity. 25. Time becomes elastic. It is measured not in minutes, but in the gradual arc of a particularly bright star, as it drifts from the center of the pane towards the left-hand mullion. It is measured in the deepening of the silence, as the last distant car engine fades, and the world truly sleeps. The ambient rustle of nocturnal creatures, a hedgehog in the leaves, an owl's distant call, becomes part of the tapestry, not an interruption. The cool air seems to settle more heavily upon the skin. The body sinks deeper into its support. The mind, tethered to the simple, endless task, begins to loosen its other knot. Thoughts arise. A fragment of the day, a random memory, a ghost of anxiety. But they have nowhere to go. The counting stream is a gentle current, and these thoughts are like leaves falling upon it. They float for a moment, observed, and then they drift away, carried off on the dark water of the starfield, dissolving into the vast, uncaring beauty of it all. There is no room for drama here. The drama of supernovas and colliding galaxies is millennia removed, rendered silent and static by distance. What we have is the profound peace of aftermath, of light that has journeyed for years, decades, centuries to meet our eyes, telling a story whose beginning we cannot fathom and whose end we will never witness. We lose count. But what appear is inevitable. A moment of distraction, the memory of that green meteor flash, a slight ache in the neck from tilting back, the simple, wandering nature of attention itself, and a thread is broken. Was that star 42 or 43? The mind hesitates, tries to backtrack, to reconstruct the mental map. But the map is fading. The sequence is gone. This is the crucial moment, the pivot from gentle effort to surrender. We do not scold ourselves. We do not begin again with a sigh. We simply let the number go. We release the need to know. We look at the sky with fresh, forgiving eyes. It is all new again. We pick a star, any star, perhaps the bright yellow one now nearing the left edge of the frame. 1, 2, and we begin again. The rhythm reestablishes, softer now, less deliberate. Counting is becoming a murmur, a background process. The primary experience is no longer the enumeration, but the immersion. The stars are no longer separate points to be tallied. They are becoming a texture, a shimmering, immersive veil that we are part of. The process repeats. A slow, meticulous building of a mental edifice made of numbers and light, followed by a gentle, unremarked collapse. Each collapse is a lesson in non-attachment. Each new beginning is an exercise in faith. Faith that the process itself is the point. The sky does not change, yet it is endlessly new. The constellations, those familiar patterns, finally begin to intrude, but they are stripped of their mythology. Orion is not a hunter. He is a particular arrangement of bright points that our culture has named. We see the arrangement, the 3 of the belt, the 4 of the torso, but we resist the story. We see them simply as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Their cultural meaning falls away, leaving only their geometric and luminous reality. This is a deeper quiet, the quiet before language, before myth, when a bright light in the sky was just a bright light in the sky, a mystery without a narrative. We return to that state. The names are like old labels on jars whose contents have turned to dust. We brush them off. A satellite appears, a steady, moving point of light, too slow for a meteor, too fast for a star. It is a human artifact, tracing a silent, precise arc from one horizon to the other. We watch its progress. Another, We do not count it. It is a traveler, not a resident. It passes through our field of view, a reminder of the world below, of orbits and algorithms and radio signals. Its light is reflected sunlight, a borrowed glow. It crosses from one edge of our rectangle to the other, taking perhaps 3 minutes, and then it is gone, leaving the ancient, native lights in its wake. Its passage only serves to highlight their permanence. The satellite is a mayfly. The stars are sequoias. The comparison is absurd and comforting. Want fatigue. The true and gentle fatigue of sleep, not the wired exhaustion of the day, begins to blend the senses. The sound of the breeze in the high branches begins to sound like the hiss between the stars. The feel of the blanket becomes the soft pressure of the night itself. The visual field starts to pulse gently with the rhythm of a slowing heartbeat. The stars are no longer just out there. They are on the back of the eyelids, imprinted. We close our eyes for a moment, and the afterimage is there, a negative of the sky, glowing orange and green on the private darkness. We open them, and the real sky seems brighter for a second before settling back. The boundary between inner and outer is dissolving. This is the threshold. We continue to count, but the numbers are losing their meaning. 17 is not a quantity. It is a sound, a syllable that accompanies the acknowledgement of a small, fuzzy patch of light that might be a star, or might be a cluster of 1,000,000 stars too far away to resolve. The words of the count are becoming a mantra, a rhythmic drone that is less about enumeration and more about vibration. The story, this non-story, is achieving its purpose. It is circling, slowing, deepening. The monotony has become a spiral, drawing consciousness down into its still center. The cool air feels like a balm. The distant, steady stars feel like guardians. The vast, uncaring universe feels, in this moment, like a perfect cradle. There is no need to understand it. Now, there is only a need to be, briefly, within it, a conscious speck marveling at other specks, connected across the void by nothing but sight and the slow, patient rhythm of a count that never finishes, that is never. The losing of the count is not a failure. It is the intended release. Each time we lose it, we slip a little deeper into the fabric of the night. And so, as the earth turns, and new stars continue their slow parade into our frame, and old ones slip silently out, the count becomes a whisper, then a thought, then a thought, then a fading. The last conscious number is not remembered. The last star noticed is not identified. There is just the sensation of the dark, the cool, the soft, and the faint, enduring shimmer above, all blending into a single, wordless, peaceful whole. The story ends not with a period, but with an ellipsis, trailing off into the silent, star-dusted realms of sleep. The shimmer is not a blanket, but a sea, and you are floating upon it, your gaze turned upward, not to scan, but simply to receive. The distinction between counting and observing has dissolved entirely. There is now only a soft ambient registering of present. A star glows more persistently in the periphery, a steady, amber point that seems to pulse in time with the slow tide of your own blood. You do not number it. It simply is, and its being is a gentle anchor. Another, a faint blue companion a hand-span away in the immense dark, winks once, a slow, deliberate blink that lasts a full breath. Atmospheric turbulence, a pocket of warmer air, miles high, drifting through the line of sight, a momentary lens. The star does not mind. It returns, patient, eternal. You breathe out, and the sound of your exhalation mingles with the imagined sigh of the cosmos. A vast, quiet exhalation that has been continuous since the first moment of expansion. You are breathing with the universe. The thought is not grandiose. It is a simple cellular fact felt in the marrow. The oxygen in your lungs was forged in the heart of a star that died before this one was born. You are not looking at the stars. You are meeting the dispersed fragments of your own ancient ancestry, whispering back to you in photon. A satellite, fainter than the first, bisects the sky on a different, more oblique angle. Its path is a slow scratch of light on a dark tablet. You watch its entire journey, from the moment it emerges from the hazy glow near the horizon, until it is swallowed by the Earth's own shadow. Its passage is silent, purposeful, and utterly lonely. It does not belong to the ancient company. It is a scribble on a parchment of immense age. Its journey feels administrative. It highlights, by contrast, the profound natural randomness of the star field. The stars are not in lines. They are in clusters, in drifts, in lonely isolation. They are a scatter of salt on black velvet. The satellite's straight line is an imposition, a geometry of intention, upon a canvas of chaotic, beautiful accident. You are glad when it is gone. The older order asserts itself, an order of delightful, sprawling incoherence. Your eyes, untethered from the task of sequencing, begin to perceive depth. The sky is no longer a flat dome. It is a volume. Some stars feel closer, their light sharp and definite. Others feel embedded in a layer of gelid space far behind them, and behind those, a haze. The Milky Way's unresolved river, a cloud of countless suns so distant they merge into a luminous fog. You are not seeing a surface, but a cross-section of an immeasurable forest, where the nearest trees are individual and the rest blend into a mass of trunk and leaf. The illusion of a ceiling vanishes. You are peering down a corridor or up from the bottom of a well, so deep its sides are studded with lights receding into infinity. The sensation is not of smallness, but of profound inclusion. You are within this. There is no outside. The bedroom, the house, the town, the planet, all are interior spaces within this grand, star-sprinkled chamber. The walls are just very, very far away. The meteor, this one a tiny, quick scratch of white, dashes through Cygnus, the swan, and is gone before the brain can even register the wish to see it. It leaves no afterimage, only a memory of motion in a field of stillness. A reminder that this scene is not a painting. It is a dynamic system of orbits, rotations, and falls, all slowed to a pace that renders them, to our brief lives, static. The meteor will as a punctuation mark of time, in a sentence written in eternity. The sentence continues, unperturbed. The cool air has settled into a constant temperature, the exact temperature of the boundary between comfort and slight chill, a perfect equilibrium that keeps the mind just aware enough of the body to prevent it from floating entirely away. The weight of the blanket is planetary gravity, holding you gently to your own personal world of mattress and sheet. The subtle scent of night, damp soil, cooling concrete, a hint of late blooming jasmine from a garden 3 houses down, weaves into the experience. Smell, the most ancient and memory-laden scents, grounds the celestial in the terrestrial. You are of the earth, smelling the earth, while looking at the origins of Earth's very atoms. The paradox is peaceful. You are in nexus where the cosmos experiences itself, through scent, through sight, through the faint pressure of cool air on skin. A human sound, finally, the distant, low rumble of a train, miles away, carrying through the still night. Its horn blows, a long, mournful, descending note that seems to harmonize with the silence rather than break it. It is the sound of time passing in the world of schedules and destinations, a world that exists parallel to this one, a world of lines and purposes. Here, in the starfield, there are no schedules. The train's sound fades, leaving a silence that feels deeper, richer, as if the noise had been a spoon stirring the quiet, making it more potent. The memory of the horn's note seems to hang in the air, a vibration that slowly dissipates into the spaces between the stars. Your blinking has become slow, languid. The act of closing your eyelids is a long, slow curtain fall, and opening them is a reluctant reveal. Each time the curtain falls, the starfield imprints itself on the darkness behind the eyes, a negative image glowing in retinal green. Each time the curtain rises, the real stars seem to surge forward for a moment, brighter, sharper, before settling back into their accustomed places. This interplay between the inner and outer sky is becoming the dominant rhythm. The external view is seeding the internal one. Soon, they will be indistinguishable. This is the prelude to dream. The mind is beginning to project its own imagery onto the cosmic canvas. The stars begin to softly pulse, not with atmospheric distortion, but with the slow, tidal rhythm of your own drowsiness. They breathe with you. Well, in. They soften, blurring at the edges. Out. They sharpen, their points needling the dark. Your breathing is the bellows for the furnace of the night sky. You are, in this fading moment of consciousness, the animating spirit of this tiny corner of the universe. You give it rhythm. Without your watching, without your breath, it would still be there, of course, vast and uncaring. But in this subjective, fading reality, the connection feels symbiotic. Your wakefulness is the candle by which you see them, as it gutters their light in your perception, gently dim. A thought floats by, a mundane fragment from the day, an unanswered email, a chore left undone. It appears like text on a screen, superimposed over the constellation of Pegasus. But the stars are brighter. They shine through the words. The letters fragment, break apart, and their pieces become new, faint stars in the pattern. The anxiety of the unfinished task is disassembled into points of light and scattered across the light years. It loses its semantic meaning. It becomes just another arrangement of matter, no more or less significant than the dust of the Milky Way. The mind, in its sleepy state, performs this alchemy effortlessly, turning leaden worry into stardust. Another thought follows, this one a memory of a warmth, a smile. It too fragments, but its pieces glow a little warmer, a little golder, and they settle around the steady amber star you noticed before, adding to its constellation a felt meaning. The sky is becoming a personal map, not of mythology, but of your own fading consciousness. Its contents being catalogued and celestialized. The chill of the air is now a distant report, a telegram from the nerves that your brain can no longer be bothered to read with urgency. It is just data, a neutral fact like the hydrogen content of a star. The body is a distant planet, its signals growing faint. The focus of being is retreating from the extremities, from the busy governance of limbs and trunk, and pooling behinds which are now half-lidded, their aperture closing down like the lens of a camera at the end of the day's shooting. The visual field narrows to a tunnel, and at the end of the tunnel is not a single star, but a soft, fuzzy patch where 2 or 3 stars merge into a single smudge of light. This smudge becomes the entire universe. It is all that is. It pulses gently, warmly. The count is a ghost now, a faint, wordless echo of sequence. 1, 2. The gaps between are oceans of non-thought, of pure sensory drift. The numbers are no longer attached to specific stars. They are just the fading heartbeat of the intention to count, the last rhythmic firing of a neural pathway before it goes dark for the night. The story, this long winding path of meticulous observation, has done its work. It has constructed a ladder of monotony, and you have climbed down it, rung by numbered rung, into the depths of your own pre-sleep mind. And then, without fanfare, the ladder is gone. The last number dissolves. The last conscious thread connecting you to the waking task snaps silently. The star smudge at the end of the tunnel of vision softens, spreads, melts into a general, warm, dark glow. The sense of looking up vanishes. There is no up. There is only a gentle, isotropic immersion. You are in the star field. You are part of the scatter. The cool void not around you. It is you. The points of light are not distant suns, but the firing synapses of the sleeping cosmos itself, of which you are now an integral, dreaming part. The transition is seamless. There is no moment of falling. There's a moment of merging. The external sensory data, the cool air, the faint scent of jasmine, the residual pattern of light on the retina, blends with the internal generative process of dream. The star-sprinkled blackness becomes the landscape of a dream. Perhaps you are floating through it. Perhaps you are standing on a dark plain looking up at a sky that is now inside you. The narrative, having steadfastly refused to be a narrative, finally blossoms into a million possible narratives, none of which you will remember. They are for you alone. The dreams that are the final, personal, and utterly chaotic constellation formed from the carefully scattered seeds of boredom and repetition. The body on the bed is asleep. The breath is deep and regular. The eyes beneath closed lids have ceased their tracking. The room is dark, and outside the window, the stars continue their slow, silent slide across the sky. They do not hurry. They do not pause. Oh, one of them, that steady amber one, finally kisses the edge of the roof and disappears from the frame. Another, a blue-white pinpoint, takes its place at the opposite edge, beginning its long, slow drift across the rectangle of glass. The satellite has completed another orbit, unseen. The high cloud has long since dissipated. The universe continues its immense quiet business, utterly indifferent to the small temporary vessel of consciousness that for a little while used its light as a gentle rope to lower itself into the deep, silent waters of oblivion. The counting is over. The stars remain. And in the perfect, wordless peace that follows, There is only the slow, cool, beautiful dark, and the endless, patient, uncountable shine. The uncountable shine is not a barrier, but a medium, a thick, quiet syrup of darkness in which the motes of light are suspended, and into which the last vestiges of conscious thought now descend, slowly twisting as they fall like ash from a distant fire. The sense of falling itself is an illusion, a relic of the body's memory of gravity, for in this state there is no down, only an endless, gentle diffusion. The star that was a smudge now dissolved its boundaries entirely, becoming a pool of luminescent haze, a nebula within the private cosmos of the mind. This nebula pulses with a slow, warm rhythm that is entirely its own, a rhythm that has absorbed and replaced the rhythm of the count, the rhythm of the breath, the rhythm of the heartbeat. It is the foundational pulse of rest itself. From its gently swirling edges, tendrils of cooler dark extend, not threateningly, but like roots seeking purchase in the fertile soil of unconsciousness. These tendrils are the feeling of cool sheets, the pressure of the pillow, the distant weight of the blanket, all translated now into a language of Puyawaka. Mautile's sensation, stripped of their terrestrial names. They are not sheets, they are zones of mild, comforting pressure. They are not cool. They are areas of soothing, neutral absence of heat. The vocabulary of the waking world is being systematically dismantled, its definitions blurring, its categories merging. Beyond the personal nebula, the greater starfield persists, but it is no longer a visual fact. It is an assumption, a known truth that does not require verification. It is the permanent backdrop against which this final act of mental quieting is performed. Its light is a constant, soft pressure on the retina of the soul, a pressure that gently smooths out the last wrinkles of daytime anxiety. Each wrinkle, a remembered awkwardness, a tomorrow's obligation, is a tiny fold in the fabric of awareness. The starlight, patient and immense, acts like a cosmic iron, its weight and its coolness passing over each fold, not with heat, but with the sheer, relentless mass of its indifference. The fold relaxes. The memory loses its emotional charge. It becomes a flat, featureless part of the landscape, a datum, a neutral fact, no more significant than the chemical composition of a star's photosphere. That awkward moment from the afternoon, it is now simply an arrangement of carbon, hydrogen, and neural pathways, glowing with the same pale light as everything else. The looming deadline? It is a distant point of mass in the mental galaxy, exerting a negligible gravitational pull. Its terror has been redshifted by the expanding space of sleep, stretched into a long, harmless wavelength of mere existence. Time, which had already stretched into elasticity, now begins to exhibit strange local curvature. Moments swell. But the space between thoughts is not a gap, but a cavern, an echoing vault in which a single sensory echo, the memory of the train horn's fading note, can reverberate for what feels like epochs, each repetition softer, more rounded. Conversely, vast stretches of the night seem to contract, to flash by in an instant. The slow arc of a star across a quarter of the sky is perceived not as a journey, but as a before and after snapshot, with the tedious motion between the two states simply deleted from the record. The mind is editing the experience for coherence, condensing the monotonous into symbolic moments. That satellite pass, it is now a single, curved line of light, a glyph inscribed on the night, a frozen gesture. It does not move. It simply is a curve. The body is a continent sinking. Look first. The outlying territories go silent. The toes, the fingers, the skin of the calf. Their reports of position and temperature cease to be transmitted to the central governing consciousness. They are granted autonomy, left to their own quiet metabolic devices. Then the larger regions. The arms become heavy, peaceful peninsulas. The legs, great, inert land masses. Senza chain retreats towards the core, pooling in the chest and the head. The breath, which had been a conscious companion, an anchor, now operates on a deep ancient protocol. It is a tide, washing in and out of a dark cave, and with each wash, it carries a little more of the active mind out to sea. The sound of it is oceanic, a slow, rhythmic shush that is the dominant sound in the interior world. It blends perfectly with the imagined sound of solar wind, streaming past distant planets, with the silent vibration of light itself. The breath is solar wind. The blood in the ears is the cosmic microwave background radiation, the faint thermal echo of creation. The body has become a universe in miniature, and its processes are the physics of this personal cosmos. Within the mental nebula, shapes begin to coalesce. They are not images, not yet. They are more like tendencies, potentialities in the luminous fog. A slight thickening here suggests a form that could become a hill or a shoulder. A swirl there hints at the possibility of a face or a vortex. These are the raw materials of dream, being quietly assembled in the workshop of the subconscious, using the tools and materials provided by the evening's vigil. The geometry of star patterns, the quality of the light, the feeling of cool vastness. The steady amber star might become the glowing window of a distant cottage in a dream landscape. The faint, fuzzy patch might become a soft blanket or a bank of fog. The process is alchemical and utterly seamless. The dream will not feel like a departure from the waking experience. It will feel like its natural, inevitable continuation, as if the stars had always been waiting to reveal their narrative selves, but only when the watching mind was soft enough to receive the story without startling it away. A subtle internal sound emerges, a high, pure tone that seems to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. It is the sound of silence heard from the inside, the neural static of a system idling. Some call it the sound of the universe. In this state, it simply is. It is the carrier wave upon which all other sensations are now faint modulations. It is a sonic blanket, a frequency of pure rest. It hums, and the humming vibrates in harmony with the pulse of the personal nebula, with the tidal rhythm of the breath, with the slow, grand rotation of the star field in the mind sky. Perfect, wordless harmony is achieved. This is the apex of the boring story's purpose. It has guided the listener to a state where all stimuli, external and internal, remembered, have been simplified, synchronized, and stripped of earth. They are now just elements in a still life, a perfect, balanced composition titled Night, and then the final surrender of perspective. The point of view, which had been steadfastly located behind the eyes of the person in the bed, begins to drift. It floats upward, or perhaps outward, dislodged from its moorings. For a moment, there is a dual perception. The feel of the pillow and a view of the room from a point near the ceiling, looking down at the vague, dark mound of the body under the blanket. This is not alarming. It is a familiar glitch in the transition software. The perspective hovers, then dissolve. Location becomes meaningless. Olive. The consciousness is not in the body, nor in the room, nor in the star field. It is simply of the experience. It is the amalgam of the cool, the dark, the soft pulse, the hum, the faint, lingering scent, the memory of light. It is a cloud of awareness, distributed, non-local. The star field itself begins to perform its final, most merciful transformation. The individual points of light, having served so faithfully as focal points for the counting, now begin to soften their discrete boundaries. They bleed their light gently into the surrounding dark. The black space between stars is no longer an empty void, but a rich, velvety plush, and the starlight is a luminescent embroidery upon it. The distinction between light and dark diminishes. Bright stars become gentle smudges of glow. The faint stars melt away entirely, their light absorbed into the general ambient luminosity of the mental night. The sky becomes a gradient, a perfect, seamless wash from a slightly lighter, indigo black at the zenith to a deeper, warmer blackness at the edges of perception. It is no longer a sky full of stars. It is simply night as a singular, unified entity. It is night incarnate. It has weight, texture, temperature, and a benign, encompassing presence. It is not something you look at. It is something that holds you. In this holding embrace, the last concept to dissolve is the concept of observation itself. The idea of a watcher and a watched thing is a duality of the waking mind. In the deep antechamber of sleep, this duality fades. The luminous night and the cloud of awareness begin to merge. The warm, pulsing nebula at the center of the mind, and the soft, star-smudged gradient of the cosmic night become one and the same. You are not looking at the piece. You are the piece. The cool vastness is your essence. The gentle pulse is your being. The quiet hum is your voice. There is a moment, not a moment in time, but a state of pure, unadulterated isness. Ness. No thought, no image, no sensation labeled as such, no past, no future. Only a profound, neutral present that is infinitely deep and perfectly still. Is the still point of the turning world, the eye of the hurricane of existence. Nostalgia, the outside. It is the still point of the turning world. It is the gift of the boring story, the complete and total absence of event, elevated to a state of grace. From this still point, the dreams will eventually spiral out as galaxies form from primordial dust. But that is another story, a chaotic, personal, secret story. For now, there is only the sustained, endless, beautiful nothing. The story has not ended. It has transcended its own form. It has become the very fabric of the listener's reality, a wordless, infinite lullaby, woven from the threads of monotony and the loom of the night sky. The stars are still there, of course. They always are. But they have finished their work. They have counted the watcher down into the deepest, most restful of sleeps, not with a final number, but with a silent, celestial blessing. And in that sleep, there is no more count, no more sky, no more self. There is only the deep, dark, silent, and star-strewn rest. The night had become a single, vast organism, and its breath was the slow, tidal rhythm that now moved through everything. The cooling air in the room, the faint rustle of leaves beyond the window, the deep diaphragm. That light was no longer a visual phenomenon alone. It had become a tactile presence, a gentle pressure on the skin of the soul, a cool fingertip resting on the forehead of consciousness, easing it back and back and back and back and back. The story, the long, meticulous, unspooling thread of attention, had done its primary work. It had woven a cocoon of monotony, a sanctum of the uneventful. But within that cocoon, a deeper, more subtle alchemy was now taking place. The conscious mind had been placated, led on a circular path, until it grew tired and lay down. Now, the subconscious, that vast and ancient ocean, began to gently rise, its dark waters infiltrating the carefully constructed channels of thought, softening their edges, dissolving their boundaries, and the concept of the window, the frame through which the stars were viewed, dissolved first. The neat rectangle of glass, the mullions, the sill with its forgotten glass of water, these were constructs of a daytime logic, a geometry of separation. Inside, outside, to self, world, but to the coolness of the night air and the coolness of the starlight had reached an equilibrium. They were the same substance. The pane of glass was no longer a barrier. It was a meaningless ghost, a faint afterimage of a forgotten wall. The sense of being in a room faded, replaced by the sense of being on a platform, a gentle promontory projecting into the star-strewn void. The bed was not a piece of furniture in a house. It was an island in a calm, dark sea, or a flat, soft asteroid adrift in the interstellar medium. The blanket was a layer of nebulous gas, clinging close for warmth. The pillow was a gravitational anomaly, a gentle well of comfort that held the head in a stable orbit. With the dissolution of the window frame, the sky ceased to be a sky. It lost its domed quality, its curvature. It became simply space, infinite in all directions. The stars were not above. They were around. Some were ahead, some to the sides, and with the effortless, weightless shift in perception, some were below, behind the loose constellation of the body island. There was no up or down, only a serene, star-dusted immersion. The mind, freed from the tyranny of gravity's single direction, expanded in a quiet, dizzying rush. It was not frightening. It was a relief, as if a constant, unnoticed pressure had been lifted. The body on the bed was just another object in the field, a slightly denser cluster of matter, softly glowing with its own residual thermal, with pale exhalation against the profound cold of the cosmos. It was beautiful in its smallness, its temporary coherence. The stars themselves began to reveal deeper truths, now that they were not being counted, only witnessed. Their colors, previously just hints, deepened into distinct personality. That steady point directly in the mind's focus was not white, but a rich, buttery gold. It had a companion, a much fainter, steel blue point, so close they almost touched. A binary system locked in a slow, graceful dance over millennia. Seen from here as a single, slightly elongated smudge. Further out, a ruby-red giant pulsed with a languid rhythm, a dying heart the size of a solar system, its light a somber, warm ember, a fierce diamond blue star, a young scorching O-type, burned with frantic ultraviolet energy, though to the naked, sleepy eye, it was just a particularly sharp, icy point. The sky was not a monochrome scatter. It was a jeweler's tray of sapphires, topazes, rubies, and diamonds, flung with glorious carelessness across black velvet. This chromatic symphony played in absolute silence, a visual chord progression that slowly, modulated as the earth turned. The turning itself became perceptible not as motion, but as a gradual, stately procession. The entire jeweler's tray was tilting with infinite slowness, like a vast cosmic display being rotated for a customer with all the time in the universe. The gold and blue binary pair drifted at a pace slower than the hour hand on a clock toward the now vanished left edge of the vanished window. New stars entered the field of view from the right, fresh and untouched by the earlier, futile census. A dense little knot of stars, an open cluster, swam into view. To the waking, counting mind, it would have been a frustration, dozens of points in a tiny area, impossible to separate. To the surrendering mind, it was a singular, fuzzy, cotton wool patch of soft light, a celestial dandelion clock. It was perfect in its collective, fuzzy unity. The mind didn't try to resolve it. It accepted the fuzziness as the true nature of that particular piece of the cosmos. Some things are meant to be seen as a collective glow, not as individuals. Yet the lesson was absorbed without word, a memory, unrelated and unbidden, surfaced. It was from childhood, the feeling of coarse grass on bare legs, the smell of hot asphalt after a summer rain. The memory didn't appear as a narrative, but as a sensory bouquet, a taste, a texture, a temperature. And as it surfaced, something miraculous happened. The gold star seemed to warm slightly. The ruby-red giant pulsed in time with the remembered beat of a childhood heart running through a sprinkler. The memory was not confined to the internal vault of the skull. It was projected onto the cosmic canvas, its emotional resonance translating into subtle shifts in the perceived quality of the starlight. The past was not gone. It was out there, encoded in the light from stars that were shining when that memory was formed. The childhood self, the summer evening, the feeling of infinite possibility, all of it was racing across the light years, a signal forever broadcast. Watching the stars was, in a very real sense, watching one's own past, and the past of everything, streaming toward you in a silent, beautiful tide. This realization brought no epiphany, only a deep, settling calm. All anxiety is rooted in the future, in the unknown that is yet to come. But here, in the starlight, everything was already written. The light was old. It told stories of events long concluded, supernovae that had bloomed and faded before life crawled onto Earth, were only now revealing their final glorious acts to this tiny observer. The peace of the cosmos is the peace of aftermath. It is the quiet after the explosion, the calm sea after the storm. The drama is over. Only the beautiful, expanding ripple remains. To lie bathed in that ripple is to be absolved of the need to participate in drama. The mind, so addicted to creating and resolving tension, finally found a tensionless state. It was being narrated to by the oldest, quietest storyteller of all. Time and space themselves. The body continued its retreat. The sensation of having arms and legs was now a historical fact, a story the brain was no longer interested in telling. The body was a landscape, distant and vaguely remembered, like the contours of a country seen from a high-flying plane at night, a pattern of dim lights, nerve endings, on a dark map. The center of being had contracted to a point somewhere behind the eyes. But even that point was diffusing, becoming a vague, glowing sphere of awareness without a specific location. The breath was the only clear tether, and even that tether was becoming ethereal. The in-breath was the drawing in of the cold, star-filled void. The out-breath was the warming of that void, the contribution of a tiny temporary metabolic heat to the great cold hole. It was an exchange. The universe breathed the sleeper in, and the sleeper breathed a little of themselves out into the universe. A mutual, unconscious respiration. Within the glowing sphere of awareness, the personal nebula began to structure itself. The swirling tendrils of sensation, the cool, the soft pressure, the memory of light started to coalesce around emotional anchors. A gentle, fond feeling for a loved one caused a soft, rose-colored glow to permeate one quadrant of the nebula. A residual low-grade worry about a practical matter manifested as a small, dark, slowly rotating knot in another. But the overall luminescence of the nebula gently pressed upon it, dissolving its edges, leaching out it. The nebula was a weather system of the soul, and the conditions were settling into a permanent, tranquil high pressure. Gentle, warm fronts of contentment moved through. No storms. The external starfield and this internal nebula began to resonate. The gold star's pulse matched the pulse of the rose-colored glow. The slow drift of the fuzzy open cluster mirrored the gentle dissolution of the worry knot. Synchronization was occurring on a level deeper than metaphor. It was as if the brain, losing its grip on the separate categories of self and environment, was allowing its own electrical storms, its emotions, its memories, to be paced by the grand, slow, electromagnetic rhythms of the cosmos. The human system was entraining to a universal clock. The result was a profound, wordless harmony, a chord where the note of a carbon-based life form's fleeting joy perfectly harmonized with the billion-year-old note of a hydrogen fusion reaction in a stellar core. The music was inaudible, but it was felt in every cell that was still listening, a vibration of pure, peaceful belonging. Then a subtle shift in the quality of darkness. From the eastern extreme of the perceptual field, a barely perceptible lightening began, not of the sky, but of the blackness itself. It was not dawn. Dawn was hours away. This was something else. The Gegenschein, perhaps, or the faintest beginning of the zodiacal light. A cosmic twilight caused by sunlight, reflecting off interplanetary dust in the plane of the solar system. It was a smear of ghostly luminescence, a pale, translucent veil, drawn across a section of the stars, dimming them not by cloud, but by adding a layer of faintest milk to the ink of space. This veil had a profound psychological effect. It made the universe feel enclosed, yet not claustrophobic. It was the ceiling of a sacred chamber, infinitely high, but softly defined. The stars were not lost behind it. They were softened, made dreamier, their light diffused and blended. This veil became the final visual anchor, the last thing the slipping consciousness would recognize as a thing. It was the curtain rising on the theater of dream. The process of dreaming began not with images, but with a translation of physical law. The physics of the waking world, gravity, friction, solidity, melted into the physics of the dream world, which is the physics of meaning and emotion. The gentle gravitational pull of the pillow became the attractive force of a comforting idea. The friction of the sheet became the slight resistance of a pleasant memory. The solidity of the mattress became the stable foundation of a deep-seated, unspoken knowledge. The star field itself underwent its final metamorphosis. The individual stars, now soft smudges behind the luminous veil, began to drift not with the slow turn of the Earth, but with the logic of narrative. The gold binary pair drifted closer to the ruby giant, forming a triangle. The mind, even in its sleep, sought pattern, relationship. This triangle became significant. It was a sign, a marker. It was the opening glyph of the dream. The high internal hum, the sound of neural silence, began to modulate. It developed undertones, a complex harmony. Within it, one could almost imagine the distant ring of crystalline spheres, the music of the Pythagorean cosmos. It was a sound that felt ancient and holy, the baseline of existence. Against this baseline, other, more defined sounds began to emerge, but they were born from the visual data. The slow drift of the satellite translated into a long, sustained, sliding cello note. The pulse of the red giant became a soft, deep drum beat, once per lifetime. The faint, almost imperceptible flicker of a star wavering in the atmosphere became the delicate plink of a water drop falling into a still pool, somewhere in the architecture of the mind. A synesthetic symphony was being composed in real time, where sight became sound, and sound became feeling, and feeling became spatial location. The last vestige of the counting mind made one final, faint attempt at order. A number floated up from the depths. 7. It was not attached to anything. It was just the ghost of the ritual, a sinking relic. The number 7 drifted across the dark like a lone bit of space debris, turning slowly end over end. It approached the triangular configuration of the gold, blue, and ruby stars, and as it touched the triangle, it dissolved, its angular digits softening, curling, transforming into a small silvery 7-pointed star that took its place as a new tiny member of the celestial group. The mind had finally succeeded in its task. It had counted a star into existence. The act was complete. The tool of enumeration was no longer needed, and was absorbed into the beauty it had tried to measure. Now, the threshold was not just crossed, it was erased. There was no longer a this side and the other side. The warm, pulsing personal nebula and the cool, vast veiled star field merged completely. They were one environment, and within this unified environment, the first true dream image crystallized. It was not a scene from life. It was abstract, yet deeply familiar. It was a path of soft dark moss, lit by the gold and blue binary stars, which were now not stars but two glowing lanterns hanging from the branches of an immense invisible tree. The ruby giant was a warm light in the window of a distant cottage at the end of the path. The fuzzy open cluster was a haze of fireflies, hovering over a still dark pond to the side of the path. The celestial veil was a mist rising from the pond, softening all the edges of the world. The path felt known. It felt like the path home, though the home was not a house from memory, but the state of rest itself. The dreaming self, which was no longer a self, but a point of moving perspective, began to glide down this path. The motion was effortless, a smooth, floating progression. The coolness of the night air was the cool, fragrant air of a forest at midnight. The weight of the blanket was the gentle, enveloping pressure of the mist. The sound of one's own breathing was the sigh of the wind in the unseen branches high above. Every sensation, from the waking vigil had been alchemized into the scenery of the dream. The boring, meticulous observation had provided the raw, undifferentiated material: light, dark, cool, soft, rhythm, silent. The dreaming mind, that master artist, was now using that material to construct a world of profound, symbolic peace. The cottage at the end of the path, lit by the ruby light, did not grow closer. That was not the point. The point was the gliding, the being on the path, surrounded by the transformed starlight. There was no urgency to arrive, because in this state, the journey and the destination were the same: a state of perfect, protected, guided tranquility. The story had become a landscape, and the listener had become a gentle journey through that landscape. The stars, having been counted into oblivion, had finally revealed their true purpose. They were not dots to be tallied, but seeds, and in the fertile fallow field of a mind lulled to perfect stillness, they had sprouted into a forest of tranquility, a myth of rest, a silent, slow, beautiful dream that would last until the first true hint of dawn, miles. And as the dream path wound on, endlessly, the universe held its breath, and its shining, countless eyes slowly winked in a silent, synchronized blessing for the sleeper, who was now and forever. The dream path did not lead forward, but deeper. It was a path into a dimension of softness, where every step was a descent into a more profound layer of quiet. The moss underfoot, though there was no foot, only the sensation of gliding, was not the green of chlorophyll and life, but the black green of the deep seafloor, of shadows in a primeval forest, velvety and cool, and it absorbed all sound, all. The glowing lanterns that had been the binary stars hung not from branches, but from the very fabric of the darkness itself, as if the dark were a substance that could support light, a plush, cosmic, felt into which luminous pins had been gently pushed. Their light was not illuminating, it was defining. It did not push back the shadows, but simply stated its own presence, allowing the darkness around it to remain perfectly, comfortably dark. The gold light was the temperature of just baked bread, of honey in a jar on a winter windowsill. The blue was the chill of a glacier's heart, of a flint spark in a deep cave. Together, they cast no combined glow, but rather two distinct, overlapping pools of mood. One of warmth, one of cool clarity, through which the gliding consciousness passed alternately, like a fish through shifting water temperatures. The mist from the pond of fireflies, the transformed open cluster, did not obscure, it rendered. It was the tool the dreaming mind used to soften the edges of all hard things, including the hard edges of thought itself. Memories that tried to retain their daytime sharpness, the face of a colleague, the text of an email, would drift into this mist and emerge blurred, generalized, archetypal. The colleague's face became simply a face, smiling. The email's text became marks on a page, curdling like smoke. Literal meaning was leached away, leaving only the emotional residue, which then itself dissolved into the general ambience. A stressful memory might leave a faint, sour yellow tinge to the mist for a moment, but the overwhelming, cool blue from the lantern and the gentle rhythmic pulse from the cottage light at the end of the path would soon neutralize it, washing it into a neutral gray that was there. The cottage itself was a paradox. It was both eternally distant and intimately close. Its light, the deep ruby pulse, was felt in the chest of the dreamer as much as it was seen. It was a heartbeat that was not their own, yet was more fundamental than their own. The heartbeat of the deep night, of the planet's slow turn, of the solar system's drift through the galactic arm. Boom. A long, slow expansion of warmth and light. Pause. A gathering, a contraction of cool silence. Boom. Each pulse was a wave that rolled down the mossy path, not as sound or light, but as a gentle compression of the air, a reassurance of rhythm itself. The dreamer did not move toward the source. They allowed each wave to pass through them, a periodic affirmation that the universe was still here, still functioning, still holding them in its steady, slow-paced care. There was no need to arrive at the cottage. To be bathed in its rhythmic output was to be at it, to be of it. Time in this landscape was not linear, but concentric. The present moment was the gliding point on the path. The immediate past was the mist just behind, already softening and recycling the sensations that had just occurred. The future was the path ahead, but it was not unknown. It was simply a continuation of the same soft textures, the same gentle lights, the same rhythmic pulse. It was a future utterly devoid of surprise, and therefore utterly devoid of anxiety. It was the future of a stone at the bottom of a deep lake, of a planet in a stable orbit. It was a profound and utter boredom in the most glorious sense. A state where nothing new could happen because nothing new was needed. Every possible need was already met. The need for safety was met by the enveloping, sound-absorbing, dark and soft moss. The need for orientation was met by the lanterns and the distant, pulsing light. The need for meaning was met by the simple, undeniable fact of being part of this slow, beautiful system. The fireflies over the pond were not insects, but tiny, self-contained galaxies. Each one would brighten to a peak, hold its miniature, cold light for a duration that felt both endless and instantaneous, and then slowly fade, only for another, elsewhere in the hovering cloud, to take its place. Their light did not illuminate the pond's surface, but was reflected in it, doubling their number, creating a perfect inverted symmetry of slowly breathing lights above and below. The pond was not water, but a plain of perfectly black, perfectly still obsidian. It was a hole into a deeper layer of the dream, a potential portal that the gliding consciousness felt no pull toward. It was enough to know it was there, a piece of perfect stillness and reflection alongside the path of gentle motion. The universe contained both, the slow glide and the absolute standstill. Both were peace. The synesthetic symphony continued to evolve. The cello note of the satellite's drift had become the sustained, foundational drone of the path itself, the sound of moving through space without friction. The blink of the atmospheric flicker had multiplied, becoming the occasional, random, melodic note of a firefly reaching its peak brightness. A tiny, high, clear chime, like a glass bell, struck once. The deep drum of the ruby giant was the underpinning of it all, the metronome. And now a new element entered. The sound of the dark itself. It was a sound below hearing, a subaudible pressure, the hum of the vacuum's quantum foam, imagined and felt as a deep, comforting vibration in the bones of the soul. It was the sound of existence. It was not loud. It was immense. The dreamer's identity, already diffused, now underwent its final transformation. The point of view, that was gliding, began to disperse like smoke in still air. It was not a loss, but an expansion. The sense of being a localized observer bled out into the environment, The gold warmth of the lantern was not something the dreamer felt. It was something the dreamer was, in part. The cool blue of its companion was another part. The deep, pulsing red from the cottage was a core. The soft, velvety black of the moss was the foundation. The dreamer was not having an experience of the landscape. The dreamer's consciousness was the temporary, conscious nexus of the landscape itself. The lanterns were its eyes. The path was its intention. The pond was its memory. The pulsing cottage was its heart. This was the ultimate unity, the endpoint of all meditation and all boredom, the complete dissolution of the subject-object dichotomy. The watcher had become the watched, and both had become the stage, the play, and the silent, endless applause. Within this state of unified being, a new kind of thought arose. It was not verbal, not imagistic. It was purely topological. It was the understanding of relationship without names, the understanding that the gold light and the blue light were different temperatures of the same essence, attention, that the pulsing red light was the rhythm of that attention softening into rest, that the mist was the process of that softening, that the black pond was the depth of the rest itself, silent and reflective, and that the gliding, the eternal, gentle motion, was the state of being alive within this cycle. It was a map of the psyche drawn in light and shadow, felt directly, without the clumsy translation of language. And then, from this state of perfect, distributed consciousness, a gift emerged. It was the memory of the count, but transformed. But not as numbers, but as a pattern. A sequence of spatial relationships that unfolded in the dark like a silent, four-dimensional flower. The first star, the pale silver one, was a point of pure potential at the center. The second, the faint peripheral one, was its echo, its relationship. The third, the steady blue, was the stability that emerged from that relationship. The triangle they formed was the first closed system, the first completed thought. Then the others, the quartet, the diadem pair, the shy one, all appeared not as successive counts, but as simultaneous, orbiting satellites around this central, triangular truth. The entire counting session, all 30,000 words of attempted order, was now perceived in a single, timeless gestalt. It was a neural constellation, a permanent fixture in the mind's night sky. The effort of counting had woven a net, and now the mind rested in that net, suspended in the void. The external universe, the real one spinning in the silence beyond the sleeping house, continued its laws. The Earth's rotation carried the visible star field further, and the amber star that had been a companion finally dipped below the literal, physical horizon. The constellation Orion, now fully emerged into the window frame, began its slow, stately march westward. A planet, Venus, a blazing, steady diamond, not twinkling like the true stars, rose in the east, its reflected sunlight a piercing, beautiful intrusion of pure, unadulterated light. But the dreamer, lost in the interior landscape, woven from the earlier, fainter starlight, did not see it. That light was for the waking world. The dream world was fed by the older, colder, more distant fires. The body on the bed was now in the deepest stage of non-REM sleep. Brain waves were long, slow delta waves, deep troughs, and gentle crests like the swell of a calm, midnight ocean. Memories were being consolidated, not as stories, but as feelings, as muscle twitches of the soul. The body's repair systems were at full, silent throttle. The temperature had dropped to its nightly low. The sleeper was utterly still, a statue of rest. The breath was so slow, so shallow as to be almost imperceptible. The universe outside the window and the universe inside the dream had achieved a perfect mirrored stillness. The only motion was the grand, inevitable glacial motion of the cosmos itself, and the gentle internal circulation of blood and lymph. Microcosm mirroring macrocosm. In the dream, the landscape began to undergo one last, slow change. The path started to gently slope downward. The moss became deeper, softer. The golden and blue lanterns began to dim, not extinguishing, but retreating, their light becoming more remembered than perceived. The pulsing red light of the cottage softened, its rhythm slowing further, the space between the pulses stretching into what felt like eons. The fireflies over the pond winked out one by one, not dying, but closing their eyes to sleep. Their reflections in the obsidian pond vanished last, leaving the surface a perfect unbroken black. The mist thickened, becoming a soft gray blanket, gently absorbing the remnants of the light. The sound, the sense of path. This was the descent into the deepest sleep, the dreamless sleep. The guided imagery of the dream was now gently deconstructing itself, putting its props away, turning off the light. The consciousness, so beautifully distributed, now began to withdraw even from that expansive state. It was coalescing back into a single, dense, dark point. Not the point of a person, but the point of pure being, a seed of self buried in the richest, darkest soil of unconsciousness. The last sensation from the dream landscape was not a sight or a sound, but a texture, the incredible enveloping softness of the deep moss as the gliding finally, gently, came to a stop. The last thought form was the topological understanding that the point of rest and the infinite expanse were the same. And then, even that understanding relaxed its hold. There was nothing, not a black nothing, not an empty nothing, a full nothing, the nothing of potential, of utter peace, of complete restoration. It was the blank page after the long story has been told. It was the silence after the final note of the symphony has faded. It was the void that is not an absence, but a womb. In this nothing, time ceased to have any meaning whatsoever. It could have been a minute. It could have been a century. The sleeper was not in time. They were in the substrate of time, the raw material from which seconds and hours are carved. And here, at the absolute nadir of the night, the boring story achieved its most sublime purpose. It had not just narrated rest. It had become the architecture of rest. It had used the distant, impersonal stars to draw a map all the way down to this core of nothingness. Every word, every description of a faint gleam, every pause, every repetition had been a step on a staircase leading down into the silent, dark central chamber of the self. The story was the key, and now it lay discarded at the entrance, its purpose fulfilled. The sleeper, cocooned in this full nothing, was being remade. The fragments of the day, sanded smooth by the starlight and woven into the dream, were now being integrated at a cellular spiritual level. The soul was being reknit. The psychic energy spent on vigilance and cognition was being refunded with interest. From the boundless bank of cosmic indifference far above, the real stars continued their journey. Venus climbed higher, a brilliant sentinel. A few hours before dawn, the faint, ghostly band of the Milky Way would be directly overhead, a river of unresolved dreams across the sky. But for now, in the deepest well of the night, there was only the husk of the body, breathing slow, and the soul, a dark star, resting in its own private, perfect, and infinite night. Doubt was over. The story was done. There was only rest, deep and absolute, as the universe, with infinite patience, held its breath and waited for the gentle, inevitable return. The full nothing was not an end, but a sea, a vast, placid, dimensionless ocean of pure, unarticulated being. In it, the seed of self floated, weightless, timeless, thoughtless. It was neither asleep nor awake. It simply was, in the way a stone at the bottom of the Mariana Trench is, or a photon traveling for 1 billion years through the intergalactic void is. This was the state before consciousness, after consciousness, around consciousness. It was the bedrock. Within this oceanic nothing, subtle currents began to form. Not currents of water, but gradients of potential. They were the first stirrings of return, not to wakefulness, but to the possibility of form. These currents had no source and no destination. They were circular, lazy gyres that slowly imparted a faint sense of spin to the floating seed. This spin was not disorienting. It was the first hint of orientation, of an axis around which a world could once again coalesce. It was gentle, cosmic, and inevitable as the precession of the equinoxes. From this imperceptible rotation, the first quality emerged from the uniform void: temperature, or rather, the memory of temperature. A faint, cool periphery, and a faint, warm center. It was the ghost of the experience of lying in bed, the cool air on the face, the warm cocoon of the blanket. This thermal gradient was not a sensation delivered by nerves. It was a foundational principle re-establishing itself in the universe of the self, like the first law of thermodynamics asserting itself after a moment of perfect, impossible equilibrium. With warmth and coolness came the ghost of texture. The warmth had a soft, fuzzy quality, like the inside of a peach. The coolness had a smooth, sleek quality, like polished stone in shadow. These were not yet feelings. They were the archetypes of feeling, emerging from the formless soup, simultaneously from a different sector of the slowly spinning gyre. The ghost of light began to manifest, not as illumination, but as a faint pressure on the idea of darkness. It was the memory of light pressing gently against the inside of the eyelids, a persistent, gentle insistence that there was a there. This pressure had color, but not a color seen, a color known. It was the deep, resonant red of the cottage's pulse, now reduced to a constant low-frequency thrum that vibrated in the bones of existence. It was the anchoring light, the heartbeat of the cosmos that had been internalized. Time, which had been abolished, began to reconstitute itself not as a line, but as a pulse. Boom, the red vibration, a long, silent expansion. Pause, a gathering. Boom, with each pulse, the thermal gradient became a little more defined, the textural ghosts a little more substantial. The spinning gyre gained a tiny increment of momentum. The seed of self began to differentiate. It was no longer a uniform point. A front formed, where the cool sleekness met the warm fuzziness. This front was the nascent boundary of the body, the first echo of skin. Now, sound seeped in, or the potential for sound. It was the memory of the high internal hum, but it was no longer a tone. It was a space, a resonant chamber being carved out of the silence. This chamber had dimensions, walls of varying densities. The dense walls were the remnants of deep, dreamless sleep. The thinner walls were where the currents of return were flowing. In this chamber, the first event occurred. A drip, a single, pure, resonant plink. It was the sound of a water drop falling into a still, dark pool from a great height. It was the atmospheric flicker of the star, translated into an auditory event inside the resonant chamber. The plink sent out ripples. These ripples were not waves in water, but waves in the medium of potential itself. They traveled through the thermal gradient, making the cool parts briefly, subtly warmer at their passing, and the warm parts subtly cooler. They traveled through the textural ghosts, imparting a momentary granularity to the smooth coolness, a fleeting silkiness to the warm fuzz. The ripples reached the boundary front of the nascent body and reflected back, creating interference patterns. These interference patterns were the blueprints for thought. But not yet cognitive thought. These were topological thoughts, structural thoughts. A pattern of intersecting ripples might define the concept of intersection or node. Another might define wave or field. The resonant chamber was a crucible where the fundamental mathematics of perception were being silently recalculated, the operating system of consciousness rebooting from its most basic code. The red pulse continued. A boom. With each boom, the resonant chamber expanded slightly. The ripples from the periodic plinks for more had begun to fall at random. Beautiful intervals had more room to play. Their interference patterns grew more complex. Some patterns began to achieve a fleeting stability, lingering a fraction of a pulse longer than others before dissolving back into the medium. These stable patterns were the first proto-memories, not of events, but of forms. The curve of a horizon, the angle of a roof, the spiral of a shell. They were the shapes that consciousness itself was built from. Now, a new element invaded from a distant shore of this inner universe. Scent. It was the faintest thread, the memory of the night-blooming jasmine from the waking vigil. But it was not smelled. It was a color thought, a green-gold thread that wove itself through the interference patterns in the resonant chamber. Where it passed, the patterns it touched momentarily gained a quality of outside, of garden, of life suspended in darkness. This scent thread acted as a catalyst. It prompted the stable interference patterns to begin to cluster, not randomly, but according to an affinity for this thread of exteriority. Patterns that resonated with curve and growth clustered near it. Patterns of stillness and depth moved away, forming their own cluster on the opposite side of the chamber. A polarity was emerging. The warm, fuzzy, red pulsing, scent-threaded cluster was one pole. The cool, sleek, silent, deep cluster was the other. And between them, in the medium of the chamber, the ripples and pulses and plinks played on, weaving an ever more complex field of potential experience. The seed of self was no longer a seed. It was now an oval, a lozenge of differentiated space, with poles and a field. It was a primitive, psychic cell, The next phase was incorporation. The field of interference patterns began to fold. Imagine a flat, shimmering sheet of complex, vibrating patterns. Now, slowly, sections of this sheet began to rise, to curve in 3 dimensions, to tuck inwards. A pattern representing a soft pressure folded inwards and became the concept of touch receive. A pattern representing a radiating warmth folded outwards and became the concept of heat given. The folding was a process of embodiment. The abstract topological thoughts were acquiring a dimensional relationship to the central lozenge. They were becoming senses. This process was slow, majestic, and utterly silent. It was the formation of a world from the inside out. The red pulse was its sun. The cool pole was its moon. The scent thread was its wind, carrying pollen of meaning, and the plinks were its rainfall, each drop seeding a momentary, beautiful complication in the growing ecology of mind. Then, a tremor, a deep, sub-audible thud that was not part of the red rhythm. It was external. The first intrusion from the world outside the full nothing. It was the sound of the house itself, a beam contracting in the night's cool nadir, or the water heater in a distant basement clicking on for its pre-dawn cycle. In the resonant chamber, this thud was a foreign object. A stone dropped into the carefully calibrated interference patterns. It sent out jagged, chaotic ripples that disrupted the gentle folding process. But the system was resilient. The red pulse boomed, a slightly stronger, asserting vibration. The chaotic ripples from the thud were absorbed, their jagged edges smoothed out as they traveled through the now substantial field of the mind. They were translated. Thud became, in the folding logic of the chamber, a new pattern, a pattern of structure, of support, of the vessel that contains. It was incorporated. The house's sound became the dream's foundation. Why became the dream's foundation? The mind, in its deep sleep, was so profoundly integrative that it turned noise into architecture. Now, the process accelerated. The folding became more complex, more layered. The sensory concepts began to combine. Touch receive folded into cool sleekness, creating the specific concept of cool surface against skin. Heat given folded into rhythmic pulse, creating warmth that comes in waves. These combinations were not yet memories of specific events. They were the creation of the categories that would allow such memories to be understood. Mind was rebuilding its filing system from the ground up, and with this layered complexity came the first, faint whisper of narrative. Not a story with characters and plot, but a narrative of process, a sequence. The plink, then the ripple, then the folding, then the integration. This sequence, repeated with infinite variation, created the ghost of time as progression. Before, there was only pulse. Now, there was pulse and consequence. This was the dawn of cause and effect within the private universe. The cool pole, the cluster of stillness and depth, began to exert a new kind of pull. It was the gravitational pull of the dreamless sea, the full nothing, calling its creation back. But the warm pole, with its red pulse and scent thread, held fast. The lozenge of self was now in a gentle tension, stretched between the urge to return to formless unity and the urge to crystallize into distinct experience. This tension was the engine of the next stage. From this stretched state, along the field between the poles, the first true image was born. It was not a visual image as we know it. It was a multisensory singularity. It was the concept of the path. It contained the softness of the moss, touch, the gold and blue of the lanterns, sight as temperature, the rhythm of the cottage, sound as pressure, the scent of the jasmine thread, smell, and the taste of cool metallic night air. All these folded sensory concepts, pulled taut in the field between the poles, suddenly snapped together into a single, cohesive, immersive state. The path was not seen. It was inhabited instantly and completely. The dreamer was back on the path, but it was not a return. It was a recreation, richer and more saturated than before, because now it was built from the fundamental particles of perception, newly forged and perfectly integrated. The gold lantern was not just light. It was the meaning of warm attention. The blue lantern was the meaning of calm observation. The ruby pulse was the meaning of a sustaining core. The dreamer glided, but now the gliding was understood as the meaning of consciousness itself, a gentle traversal through a world of its own making. This was the dream, not as escape, but as integration. The boring wakeful vigil had provided the raw data. Light points, cool air, silence, rhythm. The descent into nothing had broken that data down to its atomic level. And now, the rising arc of the sleep cycle was reassembling those atoms into molecules, those molecules into cells, those cells into a living, breathing, symbolic world that made profound, wordless sense of the original experience. The stars had been internalized, metabolized, and were now being used as the energy source for a psychic reconstruction of peace. The body in the bed began its own subtle turn. The slow delta waves began to be interspersed with the faster, sawtooth patterns of REM sleep. Under closed lids, the eyes began their rapid, flickering dance, tracing the contours of the internal path following the glide. The physical breath synchronized with the pulse of the ruby light in the dream. The paralysis of deep sleep remained, locking the body in safe stillness while the mind embarked on its most vivid journey. In the dream, the path began to branch, not with anxiety, but with curiosity. One branch, lit more strongly by the gold lantern, led upward toward a faint, silvery glimmer that felt like the concept of morning or future. The other, under the dominion of the blue lantern, sloped down toward the obsidian pond, which now reflected not fireflies, but the entire starfield, the original, untransformed stars, countless and sharp. The dreamer, at the nexus of this choice, did not choose. The gliding consciousness simply bifurcated, experiencing both paths simultaneously. The self was no longer a point, but a smear of awareness across possibilities. This was the mind exploring its own capacity, playing with the concepts of either and or, and discovering it could be both. In the upward branch, the silvery glimmer resolved into a dewdrop on a spider's web, trembling with the entire reflected universe. It was the promise of refreshment, of a new beginning. In the downward branch, the star-reflecting pond became a portal. The dreamer glided not toward it, but into its reflection, falling softly into a perfect inversion of the night sky, where the darkness was light and the stars were tiny, perfect holes into an even deeper black. It was the promise of infinite depth, of endless return to the source. And here, at the apex of this dual journey, the story, the original, boring, meticulous story reasserted itself in its purest form. It was not narrated. It was presented as a landscape of time. The dreamer could see, spread out in a non-linear array, the entire sequence of the night. The first noticing of the star field, the slow count, the losing of the count, the losing of the count, the descent into dream, the path, all of it existed at once. A completed loop, a Mobius strip of experience. The beginning was the end. The counting was the dreaming. The waking observation was the sleeping integration. This was the gift of the long, monotonous narration. It had created a container so large, so slow, and so undemanding that the mind could finally see its own shape within it. The boredom was the white space around the painting, the silence between the notes, allowing the painting to be seen, the music to be heard. Outside, the universe continued its impartial revolutions. The band of the Milky Way had indeed climbed to its zenith, a hazy, mystical road across the vault of heaven. The moon, a waning crescent, had risen unseen, adding its own frail blue-silver light to the landscape of the real world. A fox barked twice in a distant wood. A car passed on a road miles away. Its Doppler shifted whine, a brief tear in the fabric of the quiet. But inside, the dream was reaching its quiet, triumphant conclusion. The two branching paths, the dewdrop morning and the starry depth, began to curve back toward each other. They were not separate, but part of a single, vast circle. They met not at the dreamer, but at the ruby-pulsing cottage, which was no longer a cottage, but a simple, warm, red sun, at the center of a peaceful, personal solar system. The glide slowed. The golden and blue lanterns dimmed to a faint, ambient glow. The sensory richness of the dream began to gently withdraw, like a tide receding from a shore, leaving behind wet, smooth sand. The complex, folded concepts began to simplify, to flatten back into the field of potential. The polarity of the warm and cool poles softened. The red pulse slowed its boom, pause, boom, stretching into boom, pause. The dreamer was not leaving the dream. The dream was lovingly deconstructing itself around the dreamer, returning its borrowed materials to the storehouse of the unconscious. The path faded into a mere feeling of direction. The lanterns became remembered moods. The cottage sun became, once more, just a slow, deep heartbeat felt in the core. Consciousness, which had expanded to encompass a universe of meaning, now gently contracted. It collected itself from the branches, from the pond, from the mist, from the moss. It gathered the lessons of the topology, the memories of the sensory folds, the piece of the integrated narrative. It condensed this vast experience back into the lozenge, and then further back into the spinning seed. But the seed was transformed. It was no longer the pure potential of the full nothing. It was now a seeded crystal containing in its precise, intricate lattice the entire pattern of the night's journey. It was a jewel of rest, forged in the darkness. The spinning slowed. The gyres of potential dissipated. The resonant chamber faded, its last plink echoing into a silence that was no longer empty, but pregnant with what had passed. The dreamer hovered once more on the threshold of the full nothing, but this time looking back. And then, with the gentlest of shifts, a shift that had no analog in the physical world, the consciousness allowed itself to be drawn back into the warm, dark, silent center, not to dissolve, but to rest within the jewel it had become. The body on the bed took its deepest, softest breath of the night, held it for a long moment, and released it in a sigh that was the audible signature of the soul settling into its final, most perfect harbor of sleep. Above, the real stars paled, not with dawn, but with the first, faint, imperceptible lightning that precedes it, the astronomical twilight. The show was almost over, but for the sleeper, the story was complete. A story of nothing which had become everything, and then had returned gracefully to the quiet, knowing core of the self. The boring story had done its job. Only it had counted the mind to sleep, and in doing so, had given it back to itself, whole, peaceful, and renewed. The silence following the soul's settling sigh was not a void, but a plenum, a saturated, velvet quiet that had absorbed every whisper of the night's journey. The jewel of consciousness, now resting in its harbor, was not inert. Its intricate lattice, the crystalline record of star counts and path gliding, of mists and pulses, hummed at a frequency below sound, a sub-audible chord that was the harmonic meaning of all that had transpired. This hum was the sleep of the self, a dynamic, resonant stillness. The body, perfectly aligned with this inner state, had become a mere extension of the jewel's peace, the fleshly setting for the psychic gem. The heartbeat was a soft, dampened echo of the ruby pulse. The breath, the gentle polishing cloth passing over the crystal's facets in a slow, rhythmic caress. In this deep harbor, time performed its final sleight of hand. It ceased to be a river and became a sphere. The entire night, from the first deliberate focus on a pale silver star to this moment of crystalline rest, existed simultaneously at every point within the sphere. The beginning was the end, was the middle. The frustration of losing count was the same point as the peace of the mossy path. The cool air on the face was the blue lantern's light. The red pulse was the warmth of the blanket. There was no sequence, only a constellation of experiences held in perfect, weightless relationship. This was the timelessness at the heart of rest, where the mind, freed from chronological narrative, could perceive the entirety of its experience as a single, beautiful, complex object. It was a universe of the night, complete and whole. And within this spherical time, a new, gentle pressure began to form. It was not from within the jewel, but from the very fabric of the harbor itself. The external world, having been held at bay by the profound depth of sleep, began its infinitesimal press against the boundaries of perception. It was not an intrusion, but a natural tidal nudge, the gravitational pull of the coming day. This pressure first manifested as a faint gray dilution of the perfect black behind the eyelid. Not light, but the potential for light. The astronomical twilight, that faint leaching of the sun's hidden presence from below the curve of the world, began to bleed into the universe of the sleeper. It did not illuminate. It thinned. It made the inner darkness less absolute, more like a profound shade of gray, the color of a dove's wing at the moment before dawn. This thinning had an effect on the jewel's lattice. The facets oriented toward this nascent gray began to vibrate at a subtly different frequency. The memories stored in those facets, the ones of the cool, sleek darkness, the sharp pinpoints of starlight, the vast, immersive void, softened their edges. They began to blend, preparing for a transition. What? The dream paths, the cottage sun, the obsidian pond, all folded in upon themselves with a gentle, programmed grace, archived into a deeper layer of the crystal, ready for future retrieval, but no longer the dominant reality. The active consciousness, the we that had glided and observed, remained deeply submerged at the jewel's warm, red core, protected. The body, sensitive barometer that it is, began its own pre-dawn ritual. Core temperature, which had reached its lowest point, initiated a barely perceptible climb. Hormones associated with sleep maintenance began to wane, while those priming for wakefulness started their slow chemical whisper. A muscle in the foot twitched, a tiny neurological static discharge. The body testing its connections. The breath, still slow, deepened just a fraction, drawing in more of the cool gray-tinged air. Inside the spherical time, the thinning gray began to resolve into a direction. It was not yet east or west. It was simply the source of change. A gentle gradient formed within the inner darkness, from the deep, warm, silent black at the core to this cool, dilute gray at the periphery. This gradient was a new axis, a new polarity to replace the warm, cool, depth pulse polarity of the dream. It was the axis of sleeping and waking. Along this axis, the first proto-thoughts of the new day began to condense. They were not thoughts of tasks or identities, but pure, abstract anticipations. The thought of openness, the thought of horizontal expanse, thought of cool fluidity. These were like the topological thoughts of the deep sleep, but simpler, cleaner. They were the foundational concepts for the state of wakefulness, just as the others had been for the state of dream. A thought of openness brushed against a facet of the jewel, holding the memory of the starfield. And for a fleeting moment, the starfield was not a ceiling but a floor, an endless plane across which one could move freely. This was the mind preparing its metaphors. Now, sound infiltrated again, but differently. Before, the house thud had been absorbed as structure. Now, the sounds were lighter, more frequent, more diagnostic. The first, tentative chirp of a sparrow. A single, questioning note from the eave. The rustle of a newspaper being delivered to a doorstep 3 houses down. A soft, abrasive whisper. A distant airplane. A barely there synthetic wind. These sounds did not jar. They received through the gray gradient and the jewel's hum. Arriving as softened, impersonal data point, they were mapped onto the developing inner landscape. The sparrow's chirp became a tiny golden point of beginning in the gray expanse. The rustle of paper became the texture of surface. The airplane's drone became the line of distance. The process was one of exquisite reassembly. The mind was not being yanked from sleep. It was being gently, meticulously reoriented. It was turning, like a vast, slow globe, to face a new sun. The jewel of night consciousness was not being discarded. It was being placed in a new setting. Its facets now meant to catch the light of day, not starlight. A deeper, more rhythmic sound began. The faint, mechanical pre-ignition hum of the neighbor's heating system kicking on. It was a steady, low-frequency vibration that seeped through walls and soil. In the sleeper's inner world, this hum synchronized with the rising core temperature. It became the new, grounding pulse, replacing the deep, cosmic boom of the ruby cottage sun. This pulse was domestic, familiar, systemic. It was the heartbeat of the human habitat, the rhythm of the walls and pipes and insulated spaces that kept the wild night at bay. It signified shelter, routine, the return of the known world. With this anchoring pulse, the spherical time began to deform. It stretched, ever so slightly, along the new axis of sleep-wake. It was becoming an ovoid, then a gentle, elongated ellipsoid, the perfect, simultaneous constellation of night experiences began to subtly linearize. The memory of first noticing the stars slid toward one end of the ellipsoid, the past end. The current moment of crystalline rest anchored the center, and the thinning gray, the sparrow's chirp, the heating system's hum, all clustered at the other end, the future that was becoming present. Time was reforming as an arrow, but a slow, heavy, padded arrow. The body's signals grew more insistent. Faint thirst made itself known, a dry pinpoint in the throat. The bladder offered a soft, polite reminder of its existence. The weight of the blanket, which had been pure comfort, now registered as a specific pressure on the hips and shoulders. These were not annoyances. They were the body's gentle, internal ushers, tapping on the door of consciousness, reminding it of the vehicle it would need to pilot upon its return. In response, the consciousness at the jewel's core began a slow, swelling ascent. It was not a leap, but a buoyant rise, like a deep-sea diver allowing just a little air into the buoyancy compensator. As it rose through the layers of its own crystal, it gathered the translated experiences of the approaching dawn. It passed through the layer where the sparrow's chirp was a golden point and absorbed its quality of morning announcement. It passed through the layer of the heating hum, absorbing its quality of systemic warmth. It passed through the layer of the thinning gray, absorbing its quality of diffuse expectation. By the time it neared the surface of awareness, it was no longer the pure, timeless jewel, but a consciousness lightly dusted with the pollen of the coming day. It was hybrid, the profound peace of the night's depth, now wearing a faint gray-gold patina of morning. The eyes beneath their lids began a slow rolling movement, no longer the rapid darts of REM, but the lazy, heavy sweeps of someone drifting up from profound depth. They tracked nothing, simply moving through the internal space, feeling the shift from the dark, kinesthetic landscape of dream to the vague, pressure-sensitive landscape of the body in bed. And then the first, fragile thread of narrative thought wove itself. It was not a word, but a word-shaped emptiness. What? Not a question of alarm, but of pure, blank orientation. What is this state? What time is it? What was I just? The I was reforming, stitching itself back together from the distributed consciousness of the dream. It was a tentative, cobweb-thin identity, holding the vast, heavy cloak of the night's peace around its shoulders. The ellipsoid of time snapped fully into a line, past, present, future. The night was now a completed block, a polished stone placed on the shelf of memory. The present was this fluid, sensory-loaded moment of half-being. The future was the imminent, undeniable fact of the day. A decision was made, not by the thinking mind, but by the aggregate of pressures, the gray light, the body's signals, the domestic hum, the decision to test. A finger on the hand lying outside the blanket twitched. Then it curled, just slightly, the nail scraping a microscopic fraction across the texture of the sheet. The sensation was enormous. Is a crack of lightning in the quiet gray world. It was the first unequivocal, deliberate, motor sensory feedback loop of the new day. The sound of the tiny scrape, the feeling of the cotton's weave, the slight pull of a tendon in the forearm. It all rushed into the ascending consciousness like a clarifying solvent. The coagulated around this action. I moved. I felt. I heard. With this anchor, the mind began its final mapping. It performed a swift, silent inventory. Body. Here, in bed. Under blanket, slight thirst, slight pressure. Room dark, but not black. Gray shapes of furniture. Time. Likely early morning, pre-dawn. Self. Peaceful, rested, heavy. The inventory was not in words, but in a series of instant, somatic recognitions. The breath changed. It lost the perfect autonomic rhythm of deep sleep and acquired a tiny hitch of volition at the top of each inhalation. The sleeper was now breathing themselves awake. Outside, the world continued its turn. The gray light was gaining a minute, imperceptible hint of blue, then the faintest kiss of peach at its farthest edge. The sparrow was joined by another, then another. Their chirps no longer solitary questions, but the first threads of a conversational tapestry. Our door slammed, 2 streets over, a solid, metallic punctuation mark, and inside, the sleeper opened their eyes. It was not a dramatic opening. The other child. It was not a dramatic opening. It was a slow, sticky separation. The eyelids peeling apart as if reluctant to surrender the perfect dark intimacy of the inner world. The gray light flooded in, not as light, but as a cool, liquid presence that filled the room's shapes. The darker rectangle of the dresser, the lumpier shape of the discarded chair, the sharp line of the window frame. For a long suspended moment, there was no thought, only perception. The cool air on the eyeballs, the faint, grainy texture of the retreating darkness, the weight of the body, solid and real. The afterglow of the night's journey, a warm, red ember still glowing at the very center of the being. The first coherent thought, when it came, was not about the day. It was an echo, a final sigh from the story that had now, truly, ended. The stars are gone, but it was not a thought of loss. It was a statement of fact, as neutral as noting that the rain has stopped. The stars were not gone. They were merely invisible, overpowered by the slow, inevitable wash of the sun, still hidden below the horizon. Their work was done. They had stood their silent, vigilant watch, had been counted into meaning, had woven their light into the tapestry of a restorative night, and had now been relieved of their duty. The sleeper, now the waker, blinked, slowly, allowing the real world to layer itself onto the fading dreamscape. They took a deep, deliberate breath, filling their lungs with the cool, dawn-charged air. They felt the immense solid peace of the night settle deep within their bones. A calm ocean under a, now brightening sky. The boring story was over. It had begun with a single, silver point in the dark, and it ended with this gray, quiet room, a body at peace, and a mind that had been taken on a journey to the center of stillness and back. It asked for nothing but a little attention, and had given in return the most precious thing, a perfect, restored silence, inside a self that was once again whole, ready, but in no hurry whatsoever to face. And so we arrive, not at an end, but at a deepening. The final number has been whispered into the dark, and the dark has accepted it without echo. The ledger is closed. The count is complete in its incompleteness. We have not reached a sum. We have reached a state where the mind, having followed the fragile thread of sequence to its very end, finds that the thread dissolves, and there is no precipice, only a soft, welcoming expand. Look at the sky now, without the need to name or tally. See it not as a challenge to your attention, but as a mirror of it. Each point of light is a silent agreement between the universe and your weary consciousness, a promise that to simply exist, to simply glow without demand, is enough. They are not asking to be counted. They are asking to be seen as you yourself, in this moment, wish to be seen without judgment, without expectation. No, simply as a presence in the dark. The story we have woven tonight, across these thousands of words of quiet description, was not a path to sleep. It was the very ground of sleep. We did not build a bridge to rest. We became the valley through which the river of rest has always, quietly, flowed. The words were not instructions. They were incantations, slow, repetitive, gentle spells to charm the frantic badger of the waking mind back into its den, and to padlock the door with a lock made of twilight. Feel now the profound democracy of this darkness, the great leveling silence. In this realm, the nagging thought, the forgotten task, the slight, the worry, they hold no more weight than a single photon from that faint blue star drifting at the edge of the frame. They are part of the scatter. They are not rulers here. They are merely constituents, and their voices have been hushed by the overwhelming vote of the quiet. Your body is no longer a collection of aches or purposes or instruments. It is a landscape, a sleeping country. The rise and fall of your chest is its gentle tide, the pulse at your wrist, its distant, reliable drum, signaling not urgency, but continuity. The coolness of the sheets is the climate of this land, a climate of perfect neutrality. You are not in this landscape. You are this landscape, and it is at peace. This channel is a covenant with the quiet, a promise that here, in this space, nothing will happen to you. Nothing will be asked of you. The world with its sharp edges, its loud voices, its relentless forward motion is suspended. We have entered a side room of existence where the only law is gravity, and it is a gentle force, pulling you not down, but inward. Toward your own still center. The greatest journey you took tonight was not through the constellations, but through the layers of your own need to do. You laid down the tools of productivity, of problem solving, of meaning making, and in that laying down, you found not emptiness, but a richer fullness, the fullness of the unedited self, the self that is content to be a breathing, sensing presence under the ancient light. So, as this particular narration completes its long circular orbit, let it not feel like a conclusion, but like a hand letting go. My voice, these descriptions, were merely fingers pointing at the moon. Do not look at the fingers. Do look at the moon. And now, let your eyes soften until you cannot tell the light of the moon from the light inside your own closed eyelids. Carry this calibrated silence with you into the depths of your sleep. Let it be the soil in which your dreams grow, not as wild, anxious vines, but as slow, deep-rooted blooms. You have given your mind the gift of immense boredom, and in that gift, it has found the freedom to stop making sense and to simply be sent, to be a sense of coolness, a sense of weight, a sense of vast, star-dusted peace. The night is not a void to be endured. It is a sanctuary to be inhabited. You have, through the patient ritual of listening, become its inhabitant, its native. The dark is not your enemy. It is your oldest home. Remember this. In the deepest reaches of your slumber, you belong to this quiet. The story ends, because all tools must be set down. The ladder of words must be left behind, so you can rest in the space it allowed you to reach. I will leave you now, not with a farewell, but with a stewardship. I leave you as the sole guardian of this perfect personal quiet. The stars are your witnesses. The dark is your blanket. The slow turn of the planet is your cradle. There is nothing more to listen for. No, there is nothing more to follow. There is only the profound, delicious, and utterly generous. Nothing. Surrender to it, as you have surrendered to this voice. Let go of the last thread of listening and fall, not into sleep, but into the arms of the night itself, which has been waiting for you a long good night. Good night.